I'm going to call this work session on March 2nd, 2022 to order. Mr. Drewer, if you would do roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes,
Mr.
here.
Pullman.
Sorry.
Here.
Dr. Refford.
Here.
Mrs. Eubank.
Here.
Mr. Bennington.
Here. If we'd all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good morning. Welcome, board members, administrators, guests, and those who are watching or will be watching this broadcast. Quick safety briefing. Perrysburg Schools welcomes you to the Commodore Building, and we thank you for attending this morning's Board of Education work session. We care about the safety of our students, staff, families, and guests. Please note that there are exits on both ends of the hallway. In case of an emergency, an AED is located just outside the cafeteria doors on the first floor. You are located at 140 East Indiana. Thank you for joining us and supporting Perrysburg Schools. All right, everybody has the agenda in front of them. A couple of superintendent items to discuss. We have a consent agenda to approve a couple of contracts, board discussion and adjournment. So with that, is there a motion? They have a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Ms. Larimer?
Second.
Dr. Refford? And roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Dr. Refford.
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Okay, and motion carries. With that, we will move into our superintendent's report. First item is a discussion of board committee and work session schedules. We've got to kind of go back and talk about with some scheduling changes that have occurred in some people's work and personal lives. Kind of talk about how that will impact some meeting timing this year. So I guess with that, Tom, I'll turn this up, or you want to talk about the work session timing first?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. So, as board members have life happening to them and make adjustments in reaction to life, sometimes it's necessary to change meeting schedules and times and dates and things of that nature. So the last time we did it, we had a board member whose work schedule changed for a segment of time, and they had to move the meetings from 7:30 to 7 a.m. to accommodate that summer. I think it was a summer semester course that was being taught. So so one of the things that we're looking at is changing the work session times to accommodate someone's schedule, and so that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about. Also, just to follow up, I know there's been communication about the board committee meetings, and we're continuing to update as we go there. So those are the two primary things that we wanted to put on the table today.
Great. Thanks, Tom. So I think the first thing for this board to discuss is moving the time of this meeting. Thinking through the options, I'll just go first. What I'm going to propose for discussion, just to get it out there, is keep it simple and move this meeting up a half hour or back a half hour, whatever that works, to 7 o'clock, and do these meetings from 7 to 8 on Wednesday mornings. It's a half hour.
Is there a way we can look at getting back into the main? Like, to me, that is important. So when I'm considering times and dates, I'd like to move it back to the main, the cafeteria.
So you saw the parking lot coming in this morning. The B&I
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
meeting was there this morning. They're holding those meetings.
That's what reminded
But
me.
it is, if we wanted to shift a day, I guess my thoughts, and having been on this board and knowing the work that the administration has to do when we leave this meeting, is earlier in the week is better. So if we wanted to look at a Monday or Tuesday potentially for that could put us back in the cafeteria.
I think, as we indicated before in the discussion, that is important. You have a live stream, you have, it's just cameras set up.
Isn't this live?
This isn't live, it'll be uploaded the following morning.
It's not live.
It's not as important to be live as much as it's up there and people can see it.
Yeah.
I don't think
I
too many
think
people
so.
are going to view it at 7 a.m. live as much as they may replay. I think my
Some
point
people
is
do.
we've had this day booked. I don't care if we go 6 a.m. But when I build a schedule, and I'm talking personally now, built a schedule. Wednesday's got a board meeting, Tuesday's got filled in, Thursday's got filled in, so we start changing days. So I'd second at 7 a.m. on Wednesday, just because we built that day in.
7 works for me. I'll just have to keep it till 8. I mean, so I can do it, and that's fine if we can make sure that we're, within that hour. And I'll just have to leave at 8. Yeah, if we're not there.
Well, is there another day that you go longer in case something? Is there another day better for you?
Any day, any morning of the week is fine. I just have 8 o'clock is I have to be there by 8. Anytime after 4:30, except for Thursdays, works for me. I can make it work. I mean, I have obviously appointments and stuff scheduled, but that can be arranged because it's not work or board related. So.
We had a hard stop when the last time we made a change like this too. So it was a hard stop for us. So. And the work sessions aren't a full board meeting. The marathon sessions that we've had in the last couple of years, so work sessions aren't quite that way.
So did I hear you say, Dr. Redford, that you can go in the afternoon?
Yeah, I can. I just have to, my work, what do you want to call them, requirements, my work, I just with the busy season coming especially is 8 to 4:30. And I have to work around those times just because of everything that's going on with.
So you couldn't be here until 5?
No, I could be here at 4:30.
Oh, okay.
I could take, the earliest I can be here is 4:30.
Okay.
But I have to, whatever we do, I'll have to take, vacation time like I am this morning. So, but
that puts you
whatever's
in the-
important, it is important. And obviously I have to, with the requirements of, we've taken on some more job responsibilities with some reorganization, and it's a non-negotiable, but I have to be there at 8.
What would that kind of strain that put on?
It doesn't help. It doesn't help me. I'm asking a lot from my employer right now. Doing what I do and just adding another evening doesn't help me. And then there's other commitments I have outside of board and work. There's a family in there somewhere too. So.
Yeah.
Evenings for me, with still having a younger child in school, and I'm obviously, got to pick up, got to drop off, in that 4:30, 4 o'clock time range. And then I work as well, so I could be here at 6 o'clock if we wanted to switch to an evening. That way I get to pick up, drop off, dinner, and then, But I realize once a month I can, just would have to be a day where, again, I didn't have an obligation to go and pick up and drop off. Otherwise, I'm in.
Well, so let me help with this because I'm kind of doing a little bit backwards here, so I apologize to this group. We need a motion. I can't make that motion, so does somebody want to make a motion about a time, then we can have more discussion and then vote?
I'll make a motion that we keep it on Wednesday at 7 a.m. Our board work session.
Okay, motion.
Still have the video.
We need a second.
Second.
There's a motion to move our work session meetings to 7 o'clock first Wednesday of the month.
I'm sure that sits well with Randy.
This has got to cut my workout short in the morning. Not a big deal. You're paying me to be here.
I had to do some extra steps during the day.
It's not that I'm just a manual. It's just we didn't have it built in.
So we've got a motion and a second. Mr.
Seven.
Pullman and Dr. Reffert.
7 a.m. first Wednesday still.
So more discussion? Any more discussion?
I would probably have to be along with Lori, that I would have to leave by 8 so that I can get, because my work days are Wednesday and Friday, so I was hoping we would move the day since I was planning on work sessions being on Tuesdays. So it means I either have to leave here early so I can open up the shop, and I I don't think I think it's a security issue if I open up the shop too early and I'm not there.
Mhm.
I mean, right now it's 20 minutes, but, so I would have to leave here by 8:15 at the latest, so I can get the shop open. And it would depend on when clients come in. If I got clients coming in at 8:30, I gotta leave even sooner than that.
So this board does a lot of work in its regular meetings, right? 3-4 hour meetings there. We do a lot of work, committee work. We do a lot of responses to emails. We're doing a lot of meetings with people outside of all of that too. I'm okay keeping a commitment structure needs to be a tight hour. Yeah, the purpose of these is to have kind of focused presentations and discussions typically on one item. I think we keep to that. If we need to arrange an agenda around a little bit, so that if we need to vote on something, maybe we do that vote in the beginning, so that we don't walk away without having had that vote done if we go past an hour. I think there's ways to logistically handle that. So
Yeah, the last 3 work sessions have been under an hour. Just looking at the video streams. So the last one, we went into executive session, so it was only 16 minutes on video, but I don't think we were there. I think,
And we left it, I called the vet at 10 till
yeah.
9.
And then we had a 44-minute one in January, and then in December we had an hour and 2-minute one.
There you go.
that's fine because the previous president was too verbose.
Oh, there you go.
I love meetings. So you're saying Tuesday could be an option for you two? Well, if that works,
Tuesday works better for me.
If that works, I mean, does it make a difference until Tuesday? I mean, if that works for better. I mean, 7, 8.
I work on Wednesdays
I'm good
too.
at AM anytime.
So we have a motion. So
We have
we'll
a motion, so we
address
have to-
that, yeah.
So we got a motion on the table, we'll have to vote that one down and then
Yeah.
start a different one.
Okay.
Withdraw the motion.
I can withdraw the motion.
Okay, could I have a new motion, please?
You guys.
I make a motion that we move the work session to Tuesdays, the first Tuesday of the month at 7 a.m.
Okay, a second on that motion?
Second.
Ms. Larimer? Ms. Eubank with the motion, Ms. Larimer with the second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Eubank,
Yes.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Mr. Pullman,
Yes.
Dr. Reffert,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Next time on,
Oh, are we still talking about committees? I wanted to talk.
yeah, we can, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
In the literature that was on the board docs about committee meetings, we need to, I want to make a motion to move to temporarily suspend the policy 0164. The wording, a board member must be physically present at the meeting to vote. And this, until June 30th. And this complies with the state authorized law with the House Bill 51, which opened board meetings to being virtual again.
Kelly, can you repeat that again for me?
Yes, I move that we temporarily suspend our policy 0164, the wording, a board member must be physically present at the meeting to vote until June 30th. That's House Bill 51, that's when it expires, so we can comply with the authorized state law.
Is that new?
Yes.
They put it in effect last month.
Why did you do that?
It's permitted, it's not required.
Oh,
That they're providing boards the option to return to virtual.
It's required. It's a House bill, it's law.
No, it
It
says,
allows, allows you to do it,
It
but you
allows
have
you
to
to,
do it.
doesn't,
opt-in.
yeah.
There's,
Public bodies will again be permitted to hold public meetings by teleconference, video conference, or any other similar electronic technology through June 30th of 2022. So they can, it's not required, they're permitted.
That's not how they explained it to me.
And why would they want to do that again?
Just to allow for issues if there's spikes in cases or just, I'm not exactly sure, but just allowing the option to do so.
So we've got a motion. Is there a second?
I'm pretty sure it's the law. You have to comply with.
No, she just read it.
That's how they explained it to me. I talked to the lawyer at OSBA. Because she said it doesn't matter. I mean, even if we don't do this, you have to comply with House Bill 51, which now, again, allows board meetings to be virtual.
The key word is allows, you don't have to do it.
Right. Because I know, for example, in our district, in Toledo Public Schools, we're not doing virtual meetings. So it's an allowable use, but it's not a requirement.
Oh, that's not how they explained it to me.
Well, then they were wrong.
Pending any other further information, there's not a second here, so I'm not going to do a roll call on it. Any other discussion on this agenda item? Okay. Tom, next item, strategic planning process.
All right. Thank you. So at the, we just mentioned OSBA, and at our board retreat, we did have OSBA present and led the retreat. And one of the areas they touched on was the strategic planning and the services they provided. And those members that were here before, when we did the Vision 2020, might recall that OSBA was the organization that we used to help us with the strategic plan. So this is kind of a follow-up to that conversation, and Mr. Swartzmiller and I will present some information for the board. So at Vision 2020, one of the things that we did, and we talked about it, we spent a lot of time describing what should the mission statement be for the district. And at that time, going into the planning, our mission statement was ensuring students achieve their greatest potential. And we talked about it. There were some very intense conversations about, do we need to change that? What should we change it to? And the end result was adding the word all to that, because as we began to get into the conversations with stakeholders and other participants, all was the word that we wanted to focus on. And that really became what we do. Mr. Swartzmiller did a great job of leading a conversation in the district about this mission statement and what it says. And on the slide, it talks about, we are guaranteeing, ensuring that every one of our unique and diverse students, all students, reach by effort, skill, or courage, achieve through the development of their individual qualities and abilities to the level above normal or average, greatest, that lead to future success or useful potential. So it's just another way of kind of spelling out what our mission statement is and how it drives, what we do. And I think we're very proud of that mission statement. I think if you polled a handful of staff members in, the majority of them would be able to tell you what it is and why it drives us. So that's a positive. This is a copy. It's available on our website. The plan executive summary, where you can see the vision and mission statement. The vision, where passion drives exemplary education, and then the core values that were created as we worked on the strategic planning. And we value students as individuals. We inspire students to discover their passion. We challenge students and ourselves. We want to provide a safe and inclusive environment. We want to manage resources efficiently, enrich community, and we're trailblazers. So those were the things that came out of this exercise that described what we do. We talked about the 4 pillars, and the 4 pillars were kind of broad areas that we wanted to focus on. And it was finance, facilities, academic needs, and human capital and resources. So some of the things that we are building on as we move forward was developing the portrait of a jacket, where again we pulled in families and community members. We had some higher ed folks, business leaders, and school staff to come up with 5 to 6 of the most important skills that we wanted our students to demonstrate, and this is what they came up with. Truthful problem solvers, or thoughtful and hopefully truthful problem solvers. Purposeful communicators, respectful collaborators, persistent innovators, lifelong learners, and empathetic citizens. So when you look at ensuring all students achieve their greatest potential, you look at those core values, and then you look at what we want to create upon graduation, you can begin to see how there's this thread that is really being woven through the actions and the things that we do to drive our work. So again, we mentioned the 4 pillars. And so as we begin to kick off this next phase, as we move beyond 2020, thankfully, as it turned out, and so how do we begin to collect data to do this work? And so with finance and facilities, we have some things that we wanted to share. It's not necessarily easier to collect this data, but it's certainly readily available for discussion. The CUP report, this is a slide that Randy put together and shared earlier, and it just gives a history of the state average, the district average per pupil expenditures, where the dollars come in and where they are spent, and you can compare that to every district across Ohio. You can also take a look at the levy history and where we're focusing on in the future, but also looking back at the past. In the last 30 years, for example, there have been 22 levies presented to voters, 15 have passed and 7 have failed. So those are the kind of conversations that go with that. And then finally, with retiring debt, things that are coming off the tax rolls in the near future. So we've shared that. So those are some basic financial data points, in addition to the district hiring an auditor to come in to do an audit annually, and also the work that goes into the 5-year forecast. So those are some things that are data points that help us create a path to our destination, whatever the board determines that destination to be. For facilities and master planning, we just kicked off our activities on February 1st and 2nd. We're getting ready to do a bus tour of all of our facilities with the committee, so that should be interesting. And so we're excited about the feedback that we've gotten as we roll this process out. But that process, we did engage with architects and engineers a few years ago who went through all of our buildings, evaluated the conditions of all of our buildings. And so the building and site analysis, in fact, they came out with a very detailed, and you've seen this is just one slide that is the kind of the window of the deep dive that these folks did, looking at the conditions of our buildings, what things needed to be updated based on the OFCC standards, and what things based on our standards we should take a look, and then what are those costs. So we did that for every one of our buildings, with the exception of Hall Prairie, which of course is a new building. We also engaged with Plant Moran and then a private consultant, Chris Vogel. And Dr. Vogel has been someone who's continued to provide us with enrollment projections, but a study taking a look at where growth will happen and what those rates will be. So working with Plant Moran and certainly Dr. Vogel has helped guide us with those projections. Human capital, we know that in 2020 we talked about the need to recruit, develop, reward, and retain exceptional professionals for the district, and I think that's more relevant today than even then, as we struggle with filling different kinds of positions. We have data points with staffing history, and as the personnel committee updated, we are engaging with a consultant to come in to look at job descriptions and salaries and comparisons to make sure they're aligned with our competitors, industry, but also here in the district. So we have a group that is coming in to begin that work. And then the academic needs. And this is certainly an area that requires a level of expertise, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Swartzmiller.
So I think it's important to start with what we have. We talk a lot about the one plan, and just for clarification, we didn't raise our hand and say, oh, we want to jump into the one plan. Every school district in the state of Ohio will do a one plan. We just happen to be cohort 1, lucky us, in 2020. And so a look at the process, the one plan replaces what we used to submit for our CCIP. CCIP was a 1-year look. This was a lot more extensive. in that we needed to do a one needs assessment, which each building did, and then we needed to do an overall district assessment, and then from that create a district plan. So this happened over multiple months. We ended up, it created a little bit of anxiety looking 3 months out, and pulling people during a time, if you remember, January of 2020 when we dove into this, we didn't know what school was like from week to week at that point. And so this happened over multiple months during that period. But it does provide us tremendous opportunity as well, having that focus and teacher voice. And so it resulted in these 4 goals, which we submitted to the state. There's a lot of sort of oomph behind each goal, but the purpose of the goal, of course, was how are we measuring what we do, and putting those measurements into student context or student terms. And so that's sort of the backdrop. In terms of just to touch on portrait of a jacket, again, some in the room went through the process. We met over multiple months and had very differing ideas. And for this process, we used Battelle for Kids. They came in and helped guide us through that process. I don't know if many of us about the midpoint of this process thought we were going to come up with this, because it was scattered, a lot of brainstorming, a lot of ideas. But this was the result, and we were pretty proud of it. We still are. If you notice, a lot of neighboring districts have created their portrait since that time. And it's a template, really, the community, employers, higher ed telling us what do they want from students leaving our schools. At the end of the day, it's not about getting A's in math, science, social studies, and in English. It's can they be productive in our work environments? And so these are the things that they told us. We didn't have any idea of where we were going. We didn't have any predetermined goals. These are the 6 things that just happen when you get a collection of people together to say this is what we want. And we know the state report card. That probably is another work session or 3 that we can dig into a report card for 607 very unique, diverse, different school districts. There are flaws. What we take from it is how are we doing against everybody? How are we doing against our performance against everybody over time? And more importantly, how are we doing against our similar districts? And that's what this slide represents, just performance against similar districts. But it tells us just a peek, a window, and not all. So
I think, just to piggyback on that, Brent began in 2008, and it was around that time we began to have conversations about, Perrysburg locally always looked pretty good with the state report card, and that really wasn't meaningful to us. We wanted to look at the top districts in the state, certainly the top districts that were very similar to Perrysburg, and how did we compare and stack up against them. And the chart that is on the slides, which are uploaded to the board docs, you can see where we have moved and where we stand right now relative to our peers. And some of those districts are some of the better, higher performing districts from across the state. So that's why you see names of districts that maybe aren't always local.
So those are performance index tables right there,
Yeah.
2017 through
Correct.
2020?
So we sort of moved from 4 to 3 to 2 to, and Brecksville's here in our footsteps.
Yeah.
So again, just to look back at our mission statement, those 7 words, and it seems odd that we spent hours and added a 3-letter word and made it all caps, and it took us hours to come to that decision. But if you dig into those 7 words and just pull out the meaning of each of those words, that is a powerful 7-word statement. And I don't know if we can can minimize it because it's a small statement, but it packs a lot of meaning into those 7 words. And it's really about providing for all, each and every one, guaranteeing that we're meeting all of our students. So in the end, knowing that, I think the essential questions are, can we guarantee we're meeting the needs of each and every one of our students? Guarantee is a strong word. Can we guarantee? What does our current data say? Is this data is this the data we value most in informing our practice? I mean, sometimes we need to take a step back and say, are we looking at the right data source? Is it providing relevance to us? Are we creating an environment responsive to unique and diverse talents of our students? And do they have access to the tools? We can't control outside of our school. We have incredible control within our school. We have that power to transform an environment for all students based on our actions, the adult actions. We have control of that. And are we providing a safe space? Safe means a lot. Safe means belonging, it means acceptance. Automatically we think physical safety, but there's emotional safety. There's security in knowing that I'm entering a place where I feel a sense of belonging. And then Tom enlightened me on the David Letterman student, which is interesting. You see a little backdrop there of him offering to the academically average. But I can tell you, since I entered Perrysburg, and this is year 14, a concern that has been brought to me is the tremendous time we spend on the ends of advancing and providing intervention. But what about the kid who enters the classroom every day that wants to hide? Candidly, that was me. I'd get in the room and be real quiet and be polite and please don't recognize where I am. I just want to assimilate. But I wasn't being challenged either. And how many kids do we not know enough? Are we not relevant enough to challenge? So it's a big question. So what we do know, all of our students are capable. If we have anyone in our schools that thinks that a student is not capable, then perhaps they're ill-suited for the job. All of our students are capable of learning. We all share responsibility for student success, every single teacher. It's not your kid, it's our kid. And traditional educational practices have not always produced gains. It's not status quo. We need to continually look in the mirror. And so really this is about access to education, and we spoke about this at the board retreat. It comes down to a couple things: fairness and inclusion. And are we providing the best for all of our students? And I know, Lori, you like to use the band example of, prior to your son, that wasn't a program that provided that inclusion. The answer is, why not? Why aren't we? And sometimes it's forcing us to look, taking hard looks in the mirror and saying, we can't do business as usual. We need to look at possibilities and opportunities. So what is high quality teaching and learning for all, and how do we know what we're doing? Tom went through a variety of groups that help us create that picture, to form a more clear picture of what's going on and what we should do to inform our practice. 46.6%. Anyone care to guess what this percentage is in terms of students across the state of Ohio? I have no prize to give you if you get it right.
I have inside info, so I know.
Boy, you're muted. You're like, you can't play if you have a relative. 46.6% of students in the state of Ohio are recognized as living in poverty. Think about that for a second. Almost 1 in 2. are entering our schools not thinking on the top of their heads, what do I need to learn today? They may be thinking about what am I going to eat when I get home, who's going to be there, am I going to have heat? It sort of changes our mission a little bit. And we have those kids. We have those kids here.
What's Perrysburg percentage?
We are, I think we gave that figure at the board, the facilities did.
Right around.
So we are about 11.
Around 10. Yeah, I was going to say 11%.
But what that equated to is about 550 students. So in context, you could fill 4 mags.
Right, it's 11% that it's like 11%, but 500 individual
Right.
students.
Yeah,
is-
and I don't think the percentage often does justice until you turn it into a number. And then you're like, that's a lot of students. So, across the state of Ohio, we're seeing tremendous gains. And this is just a look at 08 to 18. I imagine over the past few years, it's had an incredible impact in some of these figures. But you see incredible rise in homeless, incredible rise in economically disadvantaged, just to name a couple. And English learners, we're rising across the state in students that might enter our schools with different challenges than we would ordinarily have at the front of our mind. And here in our district, just to look at ELA comparison in our performance index. And this is taken right off our state report card, which is why I pulled it. It was ready and willing to be pulled. But I think the important thing to look at is just that line of all students and the difference that different students with different traits or characteristics or just who they are of how they're performing. And the thing that's noticeable, if you look at the next slide, Tom, is not to only look at the blue, the red, and the yellow among those categories, but look at our all students compared to students with disabilities all the way to the right. And you notice the difference over time. And what we have found looking at the state report card data from 18 and 19 to 21, that gap is widening. It's widening. It is widened across the state and it is widened here. And so the next couple slides will show you just a comparison of the math data. And the next graph, you'll see that that's widening even more. Go ahead.
And if I can jump in, so it was President Bush back in 2001, one of his initiatives, No Child Left Behind, where the federal, an act of Congress signed by President Bush said that districts need to be held accountable for these different subgroups. So this isn't, the district here saying, let's divide students up into these subgroups and look at them. Let's just focus on all students. This is something that actually began in 2001. And pulling them off the state report card, we're held accountable as to how each of those subgroups are performing. And so this is something that all districts across the country have studied. And actually it's been a good thing, because prior to 2001, we looked at the all students and did it go up, did it go down? We must be doing a good job, pat ourselves on the back and move on. And when we started to dig into some of these different subgroups, we saw there was a different story to be told. So shining a light on it, it helped increase all of our scores because we looked at high quality teaching practices. So
this is just pulling from Ohio data, an Ohio report, just giving you an example of ELA and math performance amongst white students, Hispanics, and black students. Just another look, and this is mirrored in our district as well, but it's mirrored across the state of Ohio as well.
yeah, and this data was compiled off the Fordham Institute, which is I think a more conservative organization, and you can go to their website, and this is something that they have been promoting in their literature.
They just released an outstanding report called Ohio Education by the Numbers that we can provide as well. So going back to our mission statement, we're really about considering how are we aligning with that mission statement. And a process, high quality teaching and learning for all, which is what we like to undertake, will help us to assess that alignment between our schools and districts, looking at our core programs, our policies, and our practices. And of course, this is embedded in our thoughts and feelings, in our behaviors, but also our student performance as well.
So I think one of the things that we begin to look at is with the strategic planning process, Portrait of a Graduate, we hired outside organizations to help lead the conversation, to pull data together, to provide it, and allow the committee and ultimately the board to make a reaction. With this district facility planning, we hired the collaborative to help with that planning in terms of our buildings. We talked about the consultants to help with growth projections. A few years ago, we hired architects and engineers to evaluate the conditions of our building, the age, and what needed to be addressed. And we talked about a firm with auditing us that comes in, looks over our shoulder, and gives us recommendations based on those findings. And then we're doing the same thing with HR, with selected positions there. So one of the questions that we're leading this conversation to is we're pulling all this data together and relying on these outside groups and experts to help us organize what is happening and what is existing in the district. Who do we hire in regards to high quality teaching and learning, and helping us evaluate that. So that's just really where the start is.
Yeah, and just to add another log to that fire, all those firms help us to become more efficient, help us to become better at providing. But honestly, our bread and butter, what we do, what we produce, is through teaching and learning. I mean, this is our primary function for our students. And so when you look at, this is just the start. Having somebody help us with this is the start of the conversation, to be more informed with our conversation. It's not an end point. It's a process. It's a beginning. And so that engagement process, we're looking at a data audit. We're looking at, and this was very important from our staff members when they talked about having a process like this, is having focus groups. Having the ability to have conversation, because we know that there's more than just the data. Everybody has a story, everybody has a feel, everybody has interaction. So having focus groups was incredibly important, and comparing our words, our insights, our data against research, and then identifying possible steps for us. Not telling us what to do, but recommending what steps would be advantageous for us. And so our search, what we knew from the start, free is not the best. We have folks that call us every day and want free things. Well, with free, you lose the ability to dictate what you want. You lose the ability to dictate the process. Free becomes what can you do or what are you going to do versus what we want them to do for us. We were very leery with universities, and it's nothing against universities, but quite frankly, personnel at universities changes. Passions of faculty members may change from year to year depending on their research and what they're working on at the time. And then you look at their ability with grad assistants, and we know how that changes. And so we really wanted to look at experience. Who has experience doing these types of reports and conversations for schools? We wanted a review of data, and again, like I said, that conversation was very important to us. So in our process, and I can't take complete credit for this is a lot of Sarah Stockwell as well, we started with a look at 10 different companies, firms. That got reduced to 4. That got reduced to 2. And it just kept being reduced. But and then that final step was also a cost comparison. And it just so happened that the one that I think that we became most passionate about happen to be on the lower end of those offering these services. If you go to the next slide, the company that we gravitated toward is a company called ICS. And these folks, they're not unfamiliar to us. So Dr. Elise Fertura, we took a team of administrators, probably 10 or 12 of us, to Madison, Wisconsin, 6-7 years ago, to talk about inclusionary practices in special education. And so we're immensely familiar with Elise Fertura. And Colleen Capper also has a ton of research out there. She's an incredible writer of this work. But Elise also came to our district. She was here 5-6 years ago a couple times to work with our staff to talk about in that particular situation. And she has a strong passion for special education. And so they're familiar. They were very familiar to us. And sometimes that could be good and bad, right? When you're looking at doing a project like this. And the more we talked to her, the more we talked to each other, we thought she was the right fit for us. And so one of the things I think we need to keep in mind, and I put this little graph here, we need to consciously be asset-based in our work, not deficit-based. When you do a review, sometimes you automatically think, okay, are we flawed? Why are you doing this? What are we doing wrong? And I think what we're going to find is we're doing a lot of right. But how do we accentuate the right? How do we protect the right? How do we continue the right? And then if we aren't, if there are areas of improvement, how do we show the intensity in those areas that we need? And I think that's an important mindset and an important frame of mind entering any process like this. Final product, ICS spends a lot of time in conversation with focus groups, a lot of time with us and them, collecting data, looking at specific things that they may want to look at. They'll then meet with district leadership to review and approve. We then share, obviously, with all of you, and they provide a presentation to the board and address any questions.
So I think for us, as we get back, as we start to move towards a more formal OS process with engaging OSBA, and that was the next step from the retreat. I know that Mr. Dreer and the Finance Committee is working on forward-looking financial best practices, ahead of this work, and the facility master planning is also underway and taking shape. So as this school year ends, we know that we want to begin work in collecting this data, beginning to shape and schedule opportunities for engagement with staff and students, and so we know there's a window to do that. So this kind of outlines, those areas where we're beginning to pull things together, we're beginning to study, and we want to bring these things to the board. And this final piece with the academic side of things, we're certainly introducing it today, a continued dialogue from where we were with the board retreat, but beginning this conversation of what we're thinking, and certainly interested in hearing the board's feedback, today and in the next the next several weeks. So.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Brett. So with that, any questions or comments or discussion points we want to have?
When we say data, I think there's a fear out there that we're collecting some social security number or something. Can you get into that briefly? When you collect data, what are you collecting?
Well, we have data. The problem is in a school like ours, where we're all on hamster wheels, we're all in our different departments. It is data from here, data from there. What does it mean? Not only that, looking at that data from a lens of folks that have done this time after time after time. That Holiday Inn Express commercial, you wake up an expert. It's looking at that data the right way as well. So we're rich with performance data. It's just collecting that in a fashion that molds against research and informs practice, which is why folks that have experience in this area are so valuable. Did I answer that the right way?
So you're looking at assessments, you're looking at all the information that we have as educators on our students.
But also
digging
probably
into
hiring
it.
practices.
All of it. And I guess looking at this, and I'm glad you put it in this report, is I do remember approximately 10 years ago when we had the same team in a review of special education services and processes, because I was one of the parents involved in that, which, it was the good, bad, and the ugly. And I was also one of the parents in Vision 2020, and using that word "all" is very purposeful. As I'm also a parent of, I know I talk about Lucas a lot, but I'm also a parent on the other end of Ryan. We talk about perfectionism. We talk about all of these things our students go through, and I think when we do this, it's important to have those focus groups, because I think we get a lot of information from the focus groups that we can't get on paper. So with the parents and having, I know we've had a couple conversations at board meetings about perfectionism, and that C student and not wanting to, just that stress of what to do. And I think it's a good start. I like that Dr. Fertura has the experience with Perrysburg already. I just know that there was a lot of good things that came out of the special ed review, and I know that this is a great opportunity, because as you said, it's like we have all this information, we just don't have the time to get it all together. And an outside person having that, sometimes we tend to look at things with rose-colored glasses, and it's not all rainbows and unicorns. I emphasize that my experience was not always great as a parent, but we strove for change. And I think this is a great start, and I like the idea of the asset-based and looking at what we have and where we can go forward and move forward, because those gaps are concerning and they continue to grow. And in those gaps, one of the questions I was going to ask you, that doesn't, in the special education, that doesn't show the alternate assessment scores, correct?
No.
So that was another conversation that we had. I don't remember what meeting it was, but we had that conversation about, I think it was Sue in the student services, that we had that conversation about our number of students versus the state number versus how many are in alternative assessment. And those aren't included in those special education numbers.
That was a great conversation that you two had with Dr. Glusser.
Because I don't think people understand the variety of students that we serve, students with disabilities too, which is just one piece of the puzzle.
And just to add to that, changing requirements, we're going to see less students on alternative assessments moving forward.
We talked about
Which
that
means
too.
sometimes some folks that took an alternative assessment in the past will not be afforded that opportunity, and will take an assessment just like everybody else going forward.
And I believe we talked about that as well. I believe the state number of students, I'm using autism as an example because that's what popped up. State average is 9.9% approximately.
Yeah.
Our average of students with autism diagnosis in Perrysburg is 15, almost 16%. And the state or the federal guidelines? State guidelines for alternate assessment allows for 1% of the population of students on an IEP to take an alternate assessment. 1% of our 15% of kiddos with autism. So people don't understand what goes into that 1%.
And later today, we have a meeting with Mr. Christie and Mr. Cookson, the principals at the high school and junior high, and we're talking about career planning and career exposure and job readiness. So one of the things about setting up the conversations and talking about data is that is an area that we're interested in learning more about as we begin to plan for the future and how are we doing those things. So this isn't a cookie cutter, but we're coming to them with these are the things that we're interested in learning more about, because that is something that, with the Business Advisory Council, there's more and more conversation around, how are we doing with that exposure to students now? But there's data out there that we need help maybe pulling together in a way to help us make decisions. But what happens to our graduates who leave us, and where do they go, and how long are they in the system? And those are strings of data that are out there that we're asking them to help pull us together. So it's, you know, it's kind of you can customize it to fit your needs, and that's one of the nice features. And of course, as Brent talked about, the ability to engage teachers, students, and families, and that's important. So where the other folks that I know Brent and the team looked at, you didn't offer that component. So that was an attractive feature. So.
And I just want to kind of piggyback on that again. Our focus on students, hopefully it's, you know, a multitude of experiences, and, you know, in our David Letterman kiddos in the middle too. You know, and again, I just keep thinking of the mom that came in and talked about perfectionism. You know, and those students, like, how are we serving that middle of the ground that, you know, we pushed college, and, you know, and that was not the path that worked out for my son. You know, 33 ACT, had zero desire once he got to college. He's like, this isn't me. And now he's happy, you know, got a welding certification, and where else can you play with fire and electricity at the same time? He's happy as a camper.
As long as it keeps the water base fine. I like the idea of having a group like this come in, like you say, this is the heart and soul of the district, and to have another set of eyes reviewing what we're doing. Maybe they take a look at what the board's work is as well? I mean, maybe...
I included in our talks were making sure that board members had time in a focus group session with them as well.
Okay, because I think that they would... What I have observed in my 9 years of being with y'all is that sometimes you guys are very critical of yourselves, and that's okay. I mean, you grow from that, but you also need to take a look and really love and appreciate all the things that you're doing right. And I think an extra set of eyes coming in and saying, hey, yeah, you are doing all these things right, would be confirmation to our staff that, oh, hey, we are really doing some things right, like you said. And I think that would be to have outside eyes doing that. It's I know it's expensive, but the type of work that they do is really, well, it's about the cost of an audit, isn't it? Or the audit's around $40,000.
Financial audit?
Yeah. So, but numbers are easier to analyze than subjective things like this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Sue. I think it's a question of, you know, this, as Brent pointed out, this is our mission, this is what we do, this is the bulk of our work, and we're comfortable spending money for engineers and architects to evaluate the conditions of our roofs and boilers and windows and infrastructure. You know, are we comfortable applying almost a similar, even less in some cases, dollar amount to help us, guide us with the academic work that goes on in the district? So it's a good point.
Yeah, I remember during the Vision 2020 work, we were looking at those 4 pillars and actually trying to assess, you know, which one is more important. And we kind of came to the conclusion, well, they're all very, very important, right? You want to throw them equal amount of resources to understand and adjust to each one. But boy, as a board member, as a community member, if we don't have the academic side of it right, kind of what are we here for? So definitely, for me, see the need to focus resources in that area, in addition to facilities, finance, and human resources. Yeah, I'm also reminded, you know, and I don't need to remind, I'm reminded, this board probably already realizes, good effective boards are data-driven. You know, we want data and we want to make the best judgments we can off of that data. And then in other aspects of my life, right, data is kind of easy to get. It is turning data into actionable information. That's the hard part. You can throw all the data you want, but if you can't translate that into information, you've really missed a step. So, you know, I'm encouraged to hear us talking about, for the second time now, the retreat being one, and now again, strategy. You know, what is our Vision 2020 is sitting out there, and it was an important process, but it's now 2022. We've gone through some other crises over the last couple of years, so it's great that we're starting to talk about what the future of the district is going to look like, particularly on the academic side.
Well, that is that you guys have been working on this longer than just this month
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, right.
That it really started in 19.
Yeah,
That's very
yeah.
cool. Yeah, that you guys have been doing that. So what is this? Is this going to be Vision 2030 or what's the name of this one going to be?
Well, we'll
25.
Yeah.
we'll come up
Yeah,
with,
25. Maybe we shouldn't go any further than that.
Tom, where do we stand? I asked at the board retreat to get examples of the equity audits, which I followed up with you yesterday.
Yeah, I saw I missed a call, so I think we have some PDFs I know that we can dump in a Google Drive. We have those available. We'll make sure the board members have access to those. Other districts go down the road for different purposes, and I know that was one of the things that was discussed at the retreat. So because it's something that we're customizing, what reports are done in other districts probably centered around conversations like this that were specific to what they wanted to look. So when you look at those, it's not always applicable to what we want to do here because we just kind of outline what are interested in us. So.
Yeah. So when I hear you and Brent talk, it sounds like we're already doing this. Are you waiting for board approval to do this?
So when we talked at the board retreat, we kind of said, here's kind of the process that we want to do. We want to introduce it under, in that setting with the strategic plan and why this data is important. We said we wanted to bring it to a work session and then a regular board meeting so that we can have this discussion, outside of a board retreat, and that's what we're doing. That window, it's March, and so if we want to get started on this, we'll have to coordinate with the team they're out of Wisconsin, and they will want to come in while the students and staff is still here, because once the summer hits, we won't be able to track people down. So the question is for the board is the timing of this. Do you want to start this work now so that they can get in, or is it something that we want to wait? And it just pushes that aspect back when we get that data back. So it's kind of an open-ended. There's no recommendation here. With the slides, there was no, here are the dates. It's just our promise at the board retreat was to bring it out into these settings and begin to have a conversation about it.
For me, I'd like to look at, as I indicated at the board retreat, the equity audits that you guys all looked at, all of them, and be able to look and see exactly, realizing that's customizable, but exactly, what it is.
Right.
Obviously, with the cost, it's nothing to poo-poo over, but there's a cost, there's an investment, and at the end of the day, we all just have to decide, is that investment with that going to get us the answers that I think a lot of times we talk about closing this gap, but as I brought up at the board retreat, sometimes the gap is something that the district cannot control. So it might be, one of those things where you get this data, but is it going to be achievable? So,
And hearing that point for me, that's the actual reason why I would want to see that data turned into information. Is it closable? Are there steps that we can do? My expectation is that we would get an assessment on that, thumbs up or thumbs down.
And whether or not whether or not the opinion that you shared about it can't be done, we're evaluated on getting it done. So there's an investment on our part to understand what those gaps are and do everything we can to address those gaps, because we're evaluated and judged based on how well we're doing with those. So there's an expectation here in the district that we can do that, and we have data that shows that we have been able to achieve those differences because we focus on that high quality teaching and learning. When we focus on that, it benefits all learners because again, you're talking about making those connections with students, finding those best practices, and ensuring that teachers have the tools to be supported doing that work. So It's tough, there's no doubt about it. It is a challenge.
Well, I
but-
mean, yeah, I get that, but I'm saying like many things, if you look at where you can spend money and what the outcome comes, educational or, like intramural sports. If we were talking about intramural sports, getting kids involved, having that, belonging, right? Sports brings that together. I'd be all for it. I'm not sure if an equity audit, where we're gonna spend the money to make that, in my opinion, again, we all, is worth it. So again, the equity audit, for me, seeing those would be helpful in the process of.
So we're not proposing an equity audit. So when this team worked in our district before and did this, and we asked them to focus on this one area, we didn't call it an equity audit. So we focused in on our practices with special education and what we were doing to serve those students. So we're asking them to come back in almost a similar role, but we're expanding that lens. So I wouldn't say that we're asking them to perform an equity audit. And I know other districts are asking companies to come and do an equity audit, and that's not our intention.
I thought that's what this company does, equity audits.
Well, when they worked with us before, that wasn't an equity audit. It was a study.
No.
So
well, I just have seen the word equity audit and like what we wanted to do over the past couple of years, do an equity audit. I've seen that conversation several
Right.
times, so I thought that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can call it what it is, but it somewhat is an audit on.
Yeah, for high quality teaching and learning. So that's what we're focusing on.
Or equity.
I think if our mission is, obviously the classroom and what happens in the classroom, and certainly intramurals is an important component, or those extracurriculars are important. But if we're willing to spend the dollars to get kids engaged in intramural sports, I think the investment in determining how well we're doing in the classroom would also be an important priority too.
So are you asking us for approval of this today? Or
No.
No,
Just for
okay.
discussion.
Yeah.
All right.
And our next meeting is March 14th. That's,
Okay.
seems like that's tomorrow. There's questions here, there's thoughts, there's going to be feedback received.
Okay.
There's opportunity to let this soak, to ask Mr. Hosser more questions and engage. And we'll see where that takes us as far as a decision on this.
So as it's soaking, the other question that I have for either one of you are these, what I would refer to the two ladies, and I remember when y'all went to Wisconsin, but I don't remember ever meeting these women. I would defer to them. If they think that sometime after March 14th, if we approve it, they can get the work done knowing that it's testing, it's spring break, it's lack of motivation of students. I have a feeling senioritis is going to be high this year. If they think that that's a good time for them to do it, then okay. But if they think waiting until the fall would be better, I would rather defer to their experience or what they want to do rather than the board saying, well, we want you to do it now. I mean, how would we know that
We can
it
talk
would
to
be?
them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We can talk to them and ask them that question and look at the
Okay.
calendars and their calendars, because they're working in other areas too. So
Right, because you want the best data and we
Not
don't
the
want it to be,
fastest data.
right, we want it to
Yeah.
be not rushed, and if it involves, seeing if we can talk to some graduates, after they leave, which I think is a good opportunity as
Yeah.
well, because they're
Yeah.
stakeholders, and they have, the experience of
It's amazing how wise they get
after they
cross the
graduate,
stage,
correct.
isn't it?
But I agree with you, Sue, on that.
Okay.
And I look at 0.9% of the budget's not a lot of money when it comes to our kids. So
Yeah.
you look at $63,000 compared to $72 million, that, again, being a number guy, that to me is worthwhile to assess the needs of our district. Again, the state requires a report card, and the state reports the gap. We need to see what we can do to help close that gap.
Well, the state keeps moving that target point.
Yes.
It doesn't ever stay static, it just keeps moving, and people don't understand that either, so the more information we can get out about what the data points are is important as well.
I thought that was an interesting point as you were talking about the performance index and you were comparing within each year us to other schools. We can't even really compare our PI from 2020 to 2019 or 18 because the report card was never the same. It had different goalposts every time. So it's not an accurate comparison.
The interesting
that way.
thing about why we gravitate towards performance index is that's maybe the one area that hasn't changed as much as the others.
There you go.
And
it's not as rubbery.
I think the hard part also going year to year is that there's just different cohorts of kids, right? Different needs.
Yeah.
And so, but certainly stacking ourselves up against schools like us is important.
I think the video that you produced and put out for the board was excellent. I had a chance to review that because it explained in detail what the numbers were saying to us from the report card. That was what, before December, I think, some of the teacher running. That was very helpful. And always, is that on the website someplace where people can actually look at that?
It's attached to the board document.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's out there because it's excellent play by play.
That's the one when he was explaining the grade card
Right.
things.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Ray or Sue saying that maybe that could be another topic that we could bring up at a board meeting and have Brent kind of review our data. And that's a good suggestion.
Well, I always think he should be a one-man show. His videos are awesome.
Okay.
Bring popcorn and everything.
More
Well,
conversation on this to come.
Never short.
No pressure.
Thank you. So we're going to move into the consent agenda now. I need a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved, and I'd like to make a comment. I don't know how much y'all are familiar with Circle Tail. I looked into getting in really, 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 really deep in the weeds with this organization, only to be shut down by and make this public, my condo association. No ill feelings there. But this is an amazing thing. And a facility dog isn't like a therapy dog, so I don't want you to be confused about that. They are there as emotional support, the warm fuzzies, the things that only dogs can seem to do. And the way these dogs are trained and the people who handle them, work with them and work with students is so regimented. The rules are extensive, and the person who is walking around, like Elena, she works with the dogs in the school, but that person may not be the one that the dog lives with. And so, but that person that the dog lives with has to be specially trained as well. So if you read the contract in there, that's why it was saying it's very specific. Like, you can't put the dog in doggy daycare ever. You can't go on vacation and let just anybody take care of it. It has to be another therapy person that understands, so that the dog's training never can be changed or anything. So it's really, really a cool thing. And I think if we do this, that would put the dog where? In the junior high, right?
So I think the goal right now is to add a second dog to the high school.
Oh, the high school.
And then over time, the goal is to branch out in all the buildings. But that certainly is a much bigger undertaking, and that's kind of the goal. But we'll see where we go with that. So this is a great first step.
Is Aaron going to be the foster parent of
No,
this dog?
no,
Okay, I was trying to figure out who the dog's going to be with, and unless I missed
So
it.
I don't think that's spelled out in
Okay.
the contract. So
I don't think
so-
they chose. There were about 6 people
But it's
that
somebody at the high
offered to be
school.
the parent.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Right. I just wanted to make sure. I was like, oh.
One of our guidance counselors, Elena, is coordinating and kind of running point on this, and has communicated with families, and so this is just the approval. So if the board approves this, and we wanted to get this past the board sooner than later, then those signatures would go under Aaron's. that's why he signed it. I think he would be surprised to learn that he's. We'll double check to make sure he's not getting a dog.
Is he gonna be the foster dad? I mean.
Yeah, it could be a surprise to him, but I don't want to speak for him.
You may not need to worry about it unless we get a second. So can I have a second?
Oh,
She has the
sorry.
first. That's
So
okay.
moved. Second.
All right. Thanks for the discussion. Any more discussion on any items in the consent agenda? Okay. And roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Mr. Pullman,
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank,
Yes.
Dr. Rufford,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Now is the opportunity for additional board discussion.
Master agreement.
We have number.
Oh, we have the, okay, that was pulled out of consent, I'm sorry. Okay, next item on the agenda is approval of the 3-year master agreement between Oaksie and the Perrysburg School Board of Education. Can I have a motion,
So moved.
Mr.
Second.
Pullman? Ms. Larimer, and discussion? Congratulations on a successful
Yeah.
negotiation.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll
Indeed.
put out a statement, attach it, just with the terms, but it's a 3-year contract as we outlined, 1.5%, 2%, 2%, I believe, were the negotiated agreements and some language changes. So we're grateful for the team's work and certainly appreciate Oaksie ratifying it Monday. So,
Oh, very good. And roll call, please.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank,
Yes.
Dr. Rufford,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Now opportunity for board discussion. Seeing none, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Ms. Larimer,
Second.
Ms. Eubank, and roll call.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank,
Yes.
Dr. Rufford,
Yes.
Mr. Pullman,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Okay, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.